All right. Yeah. Welcome back, everyone. This is the fourth podcast, and the last three have all been, GU content creators. But this time, we got lucky enough to wrangle someone that works for, GU themselves. So welcome. Kind of squishy. Let's go.
Hello. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for jumping in. And, as I like to start all these things, just in case anyone doesn't know you, is there, could you tell us a bit about yourself and, what got you into where you're working and why you're working there and all that stuff?
Yeah, totally. So for those that don't know, I'm the head of community for Gods Unchained. Official title, very official title. I've been with GU for, I think, 3 months, nearly 3 months now. It feels like 2 years, honestly, but it's 3 months. Before that, I did communications at Bethesda. So I did that for Asia Pacific. And, oh man, how far back do we want to go? Because I've been working in the games industry as a community manager for about 12 years, which is going to age me, doing all sorts of things. Wow. I did the Australian equivalent of Gamestop. So I was the EBGames community manager, the first one they ever had, actually. And that was one of my, fun fact about me. I did Gamestop in Australia. Yeah, I started as like a little casual, holding the keys and behind a store, and worked my way up, did customer service, and then they were setting up a social media team. This is how far ago this was. And I put my hand up and said, "Oh, I know social media. I'm on the internet a lot." It went from there, and here we are.
That's huge. I know internet.
Yeah, I know the internet. I do things on. Back then, it was Facebook and 4chan. I didn't advertise my 4chan prowess. I don't think that the EBGames manager would have known what that was, and if they did, it would have been just as bad. So.
Did you ever get into MySpace? Are you as old as me? You actually got into MySpace?
Look at me. Of course I got into MySpace. I was a MySpace queen. I think Neopets and MySpace was how I taught myself how to code. Not saying that I'm good at that at all, but like I know very, very basic rules based on entirely on creating MySpace pages. So that was a fun time in my life. I had spent probably like 8 hours a day just changing the background and like the song that would play when you went to the page. I was real into it.
I remember that.
It was a real time. I feel like just so looking at me, you're like, yep, she was definitely a MySpace teenager. I was. It's true.
Yeah. Well, you've got amazing hair. Like the colours on this side, it screams MySpace to me. I love it.
It's definitely a certain vibe. I walked past a pub last night because I'm actually in the office for work. Normally I work remote. And I walked past a pub and it was playing My Chemical Romance, and I was like, well, I have to legally go in. Like, it's the law at this point. So, yeah, that's a fun fact about me.
That's huge. So, you've always worked in gaming. It sounds like before you were doing, your role that you do, communications for games and advertisement stuff, you're working in gaming stores. And for people that aren't from Australia, EBGames is massive. That's where we go to get our consoles and gaming accoutrement, from headphones to keyboards, Pokemon cards, you grab all that there, Yu-Gi-Oh! Game Traders is my favorite, but that's a dying company, unfortunately.
Yeah, wow, that's real old school. I remember Game Traders being a competitor when I worked in the stores, and then when I got to the head office, I think they have the same monopoly that GameStop has in America, where it's literally the same company. They just call it something different here for very silly and not important reasons. But yeah, no, I worked there. It was definitely a ride. I definitely learned a lot in that job, but I don't think I would go back.
Wait, so in the same way that Burger King, and because we got Hungry Jack's in Australia, right? You're in Sydney, I'm in Brisbane, we got Hungry Jack's. So, and that's owned by Burger King. What you're saying is, and Safeway owns Woolworths, right? So what you're saying is the GameStop owns EB.
Yeah.
Really?
It's literally the same company. So EBGames used to, we would report, not often, like EBGames Australia had like a pretty sweet setup back in the day. It's probably changed by now, but back in the day we were kind of cowboys and we had like monopoly over the whole market. We didn't have to really report too much to the US, but we did occasionally, and like certainly the management would go over there all the time. But yeah, if you remember EB Expo, I was part of the team that did EB Expo, the EB Games thing, but Gamestop did that after, I think. I heard. I don't know.
What was EB Expo? Was that like like all the other expos? Like the only expo I've ever been to is literally Sexpo, and that was a waste of time. I hated that thing.
So EB Expo was kind of like before PAX came to Australia. A couple years before PAX came to Australia, EB Expo was kind of like the only game-specific convention that existed. And my job, my first ever event that I worked on, that wasn't just like a store midnight launch for, Halo or whatever, was to basically create this like VIP room for people that had bought like the ultra exclusive tickets to EB Expo. And I like filled it with like arcade machines, and I got like artists, and I put all stuff in it. But people, it was at the Gold Coast the first round, and the voice of Mario was there. Yeah, don't understand why things go to the Gold Coast, but yeah, it was at the Gold Coast. Yeah. It moved to Sydney. It was in Sydney for a few years, and then I think PAX kind of dominated it. So RIP
took it over.
Expo.
That's huge. That's massive. So, and there's a massive cultural difference. Like I had a chat like this with Jommy last week, and Jommy cruises around in his GameStop hoodie, and there's a big meme thing happening on Twitter about GameStop right now. It's quite, I mean, as a 33-year-old, I'll say it's trendy for loop ring holders, but I mean, we don't do that with EBGames in Australia. I mean, that's not like a cool thing. If I wore an EBGames shirt, people look at me like, well, that dad is
trade
obviously just buying Pokemon games for his kid. Yeah, exactly. I mean, what's the difference there?
I think there's a couple of things. One, I don't think GameStop was always as, I guess, memey or as cool as it is now. I think that, like, the Wall Street, that stuff that happened a few years back, probably, and I could be totally wrong here, but, like, as somebody who was not on the inside and doesn't identify as part of that community necessarily, it feels like it was very Reddit-based in terms of, went from being kind of how we see EBGames, where it's like, yeah, it's a chain, it's stores, you see them in every food court, to suddenly it's like so much more, and it's got almost, I guess, I don't want to say cult status, but like it's that vibe of things.
Kind of.
But EBGames, I guess, because even people in Australia don't realize that EBGames is GameStop. That's power of a name, very important.
No, that's massive. That literally, I didn't know that before you just told me. I had no idea. And maybe we're not supposed to have an idea about it. Maybe, that's...
Maybe if we were supposed to know,
yeah. Yeah, well, if we were supposed to know, then they'd let us know. You know what I mean? So, no, fair enough. But when it comes to GameStop, something interesting. So, when I was talking to John, he was talking about a GameStop wallet. A layer 2 wallet through GameStop. Do you think, and I know you don't work for EB anymore, and I know this is kind of silly to even ask because you won't know, but do you think that EB would at some point incorporate something similar down the track?
So I need to preface this by saying I left EB in the year 2014. So it's been a long time since I worked there.
Okay,
the team is very, very different from when I was there. There are still some people that, have been there the whole time. The lifers there, I still see them. I would say what tends to happen is that EBGames Australia tends to often, in the past, be almost like a pilot for what happens everywhere else, because they would kind of test things in the market. So, for example, Zing, if you know Zing, that the very merch-heavy pop culture store, that was a pilot program that they pulled out. They were like, let's see what works and what happens. And I don't know whether it kicked off in the rest of the world. This is very niche Australian content now. But I would say that there's a chance. Do I think it's super likely anytime soon? Probably not. But you never know. Like, because it is the same company, it could be something that just bleeds through. But do I imagine, being able to go to an EBGames store and get something that loads up your wallet in the store? Nah, I don't see that working anytime soon. The training involved, just even thinking about having to train all those stuff on, like, just L2 as like the basis, I think that would be quite an undertaking they would have to do. And it would just be as simple to just allow Australians to have access to the global stuff, right? So, yeah.
That makes sense.
Who knows, man? I could be totally wrong. I don't even know what year it is at the moment, but it's been a while since I've been at EBGames.
Well, no, it's super interesting you say that, because for everyone that doesn't know, we're both from Australia, and one thing about our chains, Brisbane and Sydney, we have the same chains. You could go to a store in Brisbane, you go to Chermside, you'll see an EB. It's quite often actually across the hall from Zing. They don't often go side by side. They go across to maybe pretend like they're different companies, but they're not. And it's the same in Sydney. The only difference in Sydney is that the traffic's worse and the shopping centres are bigger. That's the main difference.
So, as somebody who grew up in Brisbane and then lived in Sydney for, 5 years, lived in Melbourne for another 4, I can objectively say that Sydney is the worst city.
Yeah, no, I've heard that. I've heard that.
I say it with full confidence.
Why? Like, because, again, only 4% of my viewers are Australian. So a lot of people won't get this.
So this is the most niche content ever.
Yeah, no, hard out. So, like Sydney's our biggest city, but years back when Sydney and Melbourne were like, hey, I should be the capital, and Melbourne's like, well, we are bigger, but we've got more culture. We should be the capital, and then our federal government was like, fuck it, we're going to make a city in the middle, and we're going to make Canberra. Well, fuck both of you.
Neither of you get it now. Be quiet. I'll turn this car around. So, and then you've got Brisbane up the top, and we're more of they call us a country town. We've only got a couple million here. So compared to Sydney and Melbourne, we're very small. And they call us a country town. That's what they say. When I first moved to Melbourne in 2008, and I was DJing at Bang and Next, they said, one of the guys at Destroy Lines, they said, we're going to get you a proper education, James. And I was like, fuck, man. Shocking. Amazing.
But what makes Sydney, in your eyes, because a lot of people see it as it's the hub of LGBTQ rights. That's where the parade has always been. There's a lot of big things that happens there, but I've been there a few times. I go there every year for work, and for everyone that doesn't know, I work for not-for-profit organizations, and I go down there for meetings, and the traffic's insane. I'm just going to say it. Like, what, as a Sydney sider, makes you go, well, I wouldn't, if it wasn't for work. If it wasn't for work, would you live there? And if not, why not?
So, fun fact, actually don't live in Sydney. I actually live in Melbourne, which I would say is more of an LGBT icon place. I don't know. When I lived in Sydney, I was there when I worked for Bethesda. I think that there's a lot of international culture. Like, a lot of people from other countries will go to Sydney because that makes a lot of sense. Bondi Beach and all the things that people know about Australians. It's a Sydney thing. Yeah,
we market it.
Yeah, exactly. All those things. I think also from a job opportunity point of view, the reason I moved to Sydney was for a job. And a lot of global companies are based there. So those are the pros. Many cons. I think that the traffic is obviously one of them. I think I make a lot more friends in Melbourne than I did in Sydney. I think in Sydney is very fast culture. So in terms of like my life outside of work, it was a lot easier to live in the other cities than it was in Sydney. Yeah, I feel like I'm going to spend 90 minutes talking about how much I hate Sydney if you don't stop me. This is whole book. It's like, hey, there's so many questions you could be talking about GU in general. It's just the entire podcast is just me shitting on Sydney.
No, I dig it. Like, I went on. So the first two that I did the Wispsy one first, and I did the Jommy one. The Wispsy one podcast was more so about we talked about novels, and we talked about vegan diet, and we talked about traveling across the world. And then in the Jommy podcast, we talked about cryptocurrency, and we talked about NFTs. And I went on to Copper Pitch's stream the other day, and he was like, "Oh, Dub, like I really enjoyed." He said, "He's like, Dub, I really enjoyed your podcast." Like, he's like, "You do a God Unchained you do a God Unchained podcast, but you hardly talk about Gods Unchained." He's like, "That's my favorite content." He's like, we always just get to you. Like, it's good to mix it up. So I'm not bothered.
Nice.
Like, Copper Pitch affirmed that for me. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, yeah, I'll talk about anything.
Yeah, no, I'm like, there are definitely some things I want to like touch on with you, and this is, and as I say, guys, this is our fourth one, so I haven't released yet who my third podcast was, and
Ooh.
You're not going to see this until that's out anyway. I don't know. I'll probably put some shorts out. Fuck it. I don't know. But so what's a day in the life of working for a company? Because a lot of people don't know that Gods Unchained is Australian, that Immutable X is Australian. A lot of people see us as, and honestly, I don't blame them because our internet's so inferior, but a lot of people see us as like an inferior country when it comes to making, play-to-earn games or games in general, all these things. It's not often that a game made in Australia gets such a cult following. Like, what do you want to work for them? What do you love about it? Let's go into that a bit, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the main things that I was really excited about when joining the Gods Unchained team was the fact that I could actually work in a game studio, but at a AAA level. Because, like you say, not many games of AAA quality, I don't need to be specific, AAA games, not many are made in Australia. We have an amazing indie game scene. I feel like we punch above our weight when it comes to that stuff. Heaps of, if people are super into games, heaps of really incredible games are made in Australia. Untitled Goose Game is the easiest one I can come to mind. That was a huge blow-up, and that was a bunch of guys in Adelaide and Melbourne making that game. But my background is AAA games, so the big Hollywood blockbuster stuff. And it's almost exclusively made in America, with some exception of maybe a couple things in Europe or other countries here and there. There aren't really any ability for me to work at the level that I'm used to working at the bigger companies with bigger budgets and more strategic thinking and things like that. But the flip side of my experience and working for those companies is that I never got to work directly with the dev team, because normally what happens is you have these big global satellite offices, and you feed into HQ, and you can create a banger strategy and pull together what you're going to be doing and executing on, but ultimately it really comes down to what the devs do in the game. And if you're a communications person or a community manager out in Australia or Japan, which is where I was working, it doesn't really mean shit. It's hard. It's hard to do things that are meaningful. And so when I joined Gods Unchained, one of the most compelling parts of it for me was the fact that I would be able to be playing at the level that I was playing at, with the budgets and with the strategic thinking. I'm not just doing cowboy stuff at home or whatever, but I get to actually work with the devs. And the past few months, I feel like the past 3 months of being here, I have learned more about the process of making games than 3 years at Bethesda. Not to shit on Bethesda, because I love that company. I loved working there, and all my colleagues there absolutely rule. But just being able to see inside the game and just have the ability to be yo, James, people are pissed about XYZ. Let's talk about balance. Let's do some streams. Let's see whether we can do some stuff. That just doesn't exist in other companies. So it's super cool. Yeah. And from an Australian perspective, not many people would have this opportunity. My hope is that as Web3 takes off, and Immutable being the size that they are, I feel like Singapore and Australia are going to become bigger powerhouses for this stuff. And the way that we've worked has changed, right? We're not doing in-person office stuff. Remote work is way more popular and okay. And I think with that, it's going to mean we're going to be able to do more cool shit in Australia, which I'm personally very
wow.
excited for, because at one point it was looking like I was going to have to move to America in order to like progress my career anymore. And love America, love Americans. I really like my healthcare. Like, I like Australia. So I didn't want to have to move if it wasn't like mandatory. So yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah,
I
wow.
reckon the future's pretty exciting, because it's going to flip what used to be a very centralized way of building products. It used to come essentially from America. I think that's going to change a bunch.
I think that's important. No, I love that. We've got, and as an Australian, I'm extremely proud of, when we're, okay, so just so if everyone's watching, when you're brought up in Australia, you're told that Australia is the best. That's what you're told. It's like every
We're the
country
lucky
you're born in. You're
country.
told, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We're the lucky country, like golden soil, blah, blah, blah.
Golden soil.
And then, and then, you go to university and everyone's like, yeah, per capita, we're the best at this and we're the best at this. And then people go off into their fields and they're like, fuck, we're the best at this and the best at this. And there's just a lot of pride. I think that's important, because I think one of the biggest things about growing in any industry or growing as a person is because this is the thing, right? If I was to say to Kindofsquishy, say, hey, let's, you and me, make a project and let's become the best. She'd be like, well, and I'd be like, yeah, that's pretty cool, let's go. But if I was like, hey, Australia's on the line, you and me as Australians, we're going to do this and we're going to crush other countries, we'd be like, yeah, let's fucking go, because it's about that team spirit.
What are we doing?
I think that's how we were brought up. Yeah, exactly. So that's how we were brought up. We were brought up with a very competitive mindset in Australia of, hey, we're smaller in size, we've got a big country but a very small population, but per capita, we've achieved this, 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 and this.
We punch above our weight.
Exactly. And we were trained. And again, we went to schools in different places, obviously. And I'm telling by what I'm getting back here that it's similar. Is that fair to say? Is that similar?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's also, working in an international company and dealing with a lot of, people from around the world. I think that leaning into the fact that I'm an Australian has helped me more times than I can count, where I just lean real heavy into like Crocodile Dundee thing. But the inverse is when I'm traveling and I'm in another country and I hit upon another Australian accent, we're just like, yo, let's be immediate best friends. Especially like when I was in Japan, I would hear an Australian accent and be like, bestie. So yeah, it's good. I think that there's a camaraderie that is pretty cool that, I don't know, people outside of Australia probably don't realize. And I assume a lot of your viewers would be American. So this has been the most niche 20 minutes of their life.
Yeah, no, for real. And I try to make it known as much as possible that I'm, mainly streaming an Australian game. But in saying that, the viewers are minimal Australians, like maybe 3 or 4%. And there's nothing about the game which screams Australian, which I think is important, because for it to grow, it can't, because our culture is not super admirable when it comes to growth. I mean, it's like, VB long necks and,
Just
blue
durries
singlets
for
and this
some
and
reason
that.
in the game.
Yeah, durries. Yeah, durries. Exactly. And I don't even smoke darts anymore. I'm off the durries, but like you'll see me vaping all the time. I think because I've got a Swedish partner, my nicotine level's gone through the roof. I have snus, and I have snus, which is the nicotine pouches, and I have vapes, and I mean I don't smoke anymore, but I'm more addicted than I've ever been, which is a huge problem.
No, that's no good. I'm really lucky. I just don't really have an addictive personality. So, I definitely growing up in Brisbane, growing up pretty like lower class, I guess. Of course, I was smoking all the time because that was the thing that you did.
No, for real.
Like, one day, I think during COVID, actually, I went, this is really scary. I don't like this. I was smoking quite a bit, and I went, no more. I don't want, like, the lung thing was scaring me. And also I was kind of like, I'm already in isolation hell. Like, I went through the Melbourne lockdown. I assume you did too. Living in that, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna stop smoking. Like, how much worse can it get? And it was fine. Like, I really didn't crave it, and I was like, is there something wrong with me that I don't? Because I know how hard everybody else finds it to quit. I'm like, oh, well, that's good, I guess.
Well, you're lucky. You are lucky. It's not often. Well, this is the thing. It's not often you meet people with non-addictive personalities that have addictions because they swim into it and they swim out of it. You know what I mean? That they won't talk about it because they're not addicted to it anymore.
Totally.
It's more so the addicts like myself, and that's why I'm sitting here, vaping like a fiend.
Vape niche.
Because. Yeah, no, it's hectic. And we haven't been around long enough to know how that's going to affect us anyway. I mean, back when my parents were kids, my grandparents, we were told, I remember my dad told me that when he was in the orphanage in Geelong, in Melbourne, or in Geelong, he would get $1 and a pack of Camels every week. So they used to give them out. And my dad was 12. So they used to give the children packs of cigarettes every week. And that was fine. That was fine. No legal repercussions. That was just normal. There was no evidence against smoking then. And I think with vaping, we're going to see in the next couple of decades, and don't hold it against me, champs, but I think we're going to see some pretty hectic results, to be honest.
I watched a documentary a few weeks ago, probably months. I don't even know. Again, I don't know what time is anymore. But it was about vaping, and kids that were vaping in American high schools that didn't realize they were like ingesting nicotine. They just thought it was a jewel. It was fine. It wasn't a drug. It was just vapor or whatever. And that scared me for the first time. Like, I wasn't, oh no. Ah!
Just, hide your kids. That's
I never realized that. I thought everyone that was vaping were people that were ex-smokers, and I was very pro, because I was like, yeah, like, it makes so much sense to go from something that is objectively bad to you to something that is less, probably less, we assume. It seems fine. Seems fine. I'm not a doctor, nor am I a scientist, so whatever the science is saying, I'll just trust that. But yeah, like, to find out that people were getting hooked on it as teenagers, I was like, oh, that's different. That's not the same.
No, nicotine is extremely addictive. And I don't know how to say this, but how do I say this? I've never said this online before, and I don't know how to structure it so it's kosher. But my dad always told me when I was a kid that, and don't, like, I mean,
I'm so nervous right now.
Yeah, no, this is intense. So my dad said to me, James, just so you know, when we invaded, and this is what my dad said, okay? I lost him in 2004, so that's a long time ago. He said, James, just so you know, the Indians, the Native Americans, gave us tobacco as a curse. And that's as chill as I can say it. He said basically that the Native Americans introduced us to tobacco back when we took America as a long-term curse, like hey, this is a gift, but fuck you for fucking with us. And he fucked us. They fucked us in the long run.
Oh my God!
I don't know if that's true or not, but it sounds. I mean, guys, let me know in the comments. I mean, wow, don't flame me. I'm just saying what my dad said.
Just a couple of Australians who don't know anything about Native Americans or tobacco. Just, I'm more comfortable talking about Sydney traffic. I don't know.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, I don't even know why I said that. Right, here we go. It's out there now. It's done.
So we've done vaping, we've done EBGames, we've done Sydney traffic and why it's really bad. What other topics should we talk about?
I would love to discuss, honestly, I want to discuss a couple of things, and I find them intimately interesting myself, something that I've thought about a lot in my quiet moments, and that is...
I'm nervous again, just so you know.
So, okay, it's a hard question because I think you're incredible. I think you're awesome, but I want to talk about when we when we put money, and by we I mean the GU community. As you can tell, I'm very involved in GU. And you may think, oh well, that's lame because you're not hired by them, but I base my everything around that. Like, this is what I do. So I wanted to talk about when we put money into new big streamers coming to Gods Unchained, and I wanted to kind of discuss if there is anything that maybe we could have done better, or anything, like, I don't know, like,
love for the guys that have given love to GU over all the time, right? Like, that's the question. I think it's a great question. I think that my thoughts are this. It's twofold. Number one, most important point that I want to make. The people that are supporting Gods Unchained now, today, are the most important people to Gods Unchained as a whole. To me personally, like, I believe it, but also strategically, like, from a business perspective. So this is, like, my personal feelings on the matter, but also, like, the way that we see it. I think that it's a long-term play rather than an immediate play. And we need to do two things. We need to support you materially. So I'm pulling together a content creator program as we speak. I got some feedback from a couple of people here and there. I'm nearly ready to take it to the point where I'm like, okay, some more content creators that I talk with, give me some feedback, give me some thoughts, give me what you think a good content creator program would look like. And it's going to be more of like the OGs that have given love to GU, the people that are, like yourself, doing stuff all the time, streaming every single day. That's like wild and amazing. And it's the kind of stuff that we want to support. And then there's like the broader picture of like, when GU is successful, y'all are going to be successful as a result of that, right? And so my role is to community, is to making sure that everybody in the community right now stays happy, loves the game, is like on board and on the ride and on the journey with us. The marketing team as a whole, which I'm a part of, but not every single element of it, their job is to acquisition. So bring people in, open up that funnel, get as many people on board as possible. Now, what will sometimes happen, which isn't ideal, is they'll go off and do a thing and it'll be like a really good strategy, but I won't be able to keep up myself because I'll be like focusing on something else. So like really good example is when we did a bunch of those high profile streams, right? Was it Mortal Judgment? It's only been 3 months and I'm already like, what was it for?
It was it was a little prior. I feel like it was almost as enticing in the lull between, and therefore, So
the idea is like they go off and they do a campaign, and it's like, in a perfect world, I would be firing all cylinders, and there would be like a content creator program already up and running. Y'all would be reaping the benefits of that. We would be firing all cylinders from a marketing perspective, doing like those big marketing acquisition campaigns to attract new players to the game. Everyone's happy. Everybody wins. Unfortunately, when you get a bunch of new people in a room and you go, hey, welcome to the job. Here's your laptop. Here's the community. Go. Sometimes it takes a little while to be kind of jumping down and going, all right, here are all the things that we're doing. With that being said, I totally obviously saw when people kind of were like, oh man, they're like giving all this money to these other streamers and like they don't love us, what the hell? And like I get it. I totally hear you. I want to, as the main priority, like ultimately the reason why I exist is to make sure the community is loved and heard and seen and feel like there's a conduit of conversation between like GU, the amorphous blob of a team, and then you all as players and advocates. And so there's so many things I can be doing to make that happen, and it's all about making sure that I do them, right? So making sure that, I think my number one priority was to make sure that internally we were all aligned. So like in terms of what the priorities of the business were, in terms of making sure that we were all on the same page, making sure that we've got some solid communications like internally and externally to make it happen, that was focus one for me. And then came okay, let's make sure we're rewarding content creators. Let's make sure we're rewarding the advocates. So we're not at stage 2 yet, but we're getting there. We're getting real close because we've come to a point where like GU was a team of, I think, like 30 for like a very long time. And then they were like,
wow, that's a lot.
Add another, I think we're at 80 now, 82 or something.
Wow.
And they just went within, I think it was like 6 months. They went, go. And so I would say of all of the people that I work with day to day, 80% of them are within 6 months of starting. Like most of us are still in our probation period. Wow. But we're like, I'm honestly genuinely, I know that like community are frustrated about stuff. I know that things aren't perfect. I like totally get it. But with that being said, in the 3 months since I started, this isn't to big up myself at all. Just like the fact that the team is starting to like work together and the gears are going like this now. The difference between the day that I started and like today was wild. So I'm super excited for like within the next 6 months, guaranteed content creator program up and running. What it looks like, I don't know yet. I got to make sure that it's right before I kick it out to everyone and go, yeah, this is what it looks like. But, you know, other programs, like obviously the council of models, things like that, all that stuff will be running. We'll have better like processes internally, externally. All the things that you're kind of starting to see is evidence of like literally, for most people, 3 to 6 months worth of work. So it's pretty exciting. Pretty excited about it in general. That was a very long rant.
No, I genuinely love how you tackled that. That was epic, and that was epic. I totally hear what you're saying, and honestly, it wouldn't be a small job. A lot of people out there, they see these games and they always go to themselves, well, the devs are fucking up. And, you know, realistically, they have no idea, and people may hate me for saying this, but they have no idea just what goes into it. These things are not small projects, and if you want a bigger and better game, there's obviously going to be more hands that touch it. So it has to do with time, obviously, so we need patience, and that's where, you know, a bunch of content creators come in, because we kind of can nullify the impatience in the meantime. Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
Like, we kind of are there to kind of just chill people out and hear them, and make sure that they're, because this is the thing, if someone comes into my stream, which is every day, every day, someone will come into my stream and they'll say, oh, I'm angry at this, or I'm angry at this, and I just say to them, I just say, hey, like, I hear them first of all, and I'll validate them on stream and make sure they feel heard, and then, you know, just I obviously can't answer what they're saying, but it's about just kind of making them chill a bit, because once people's initial anger period is gone and they kind of compare it to other projects, they realize these projects, they're not done overnight. These are big things. Like, people see GU and they're like, well, it's just a platform where I just play cards. It's not that easy. This isn't Magic the Gathering on a wooden table. You know what I mean? Like, shit has to happen. So people need to kind of be able to vent, and that's what our streamers are here for, to be able to kind of hear, and we do, and then just just tell them that shit's going to get better, and by being able to communicate with you guys, it makes it so much more believable, if that makes sense.
Totally.
You know?
Well, also, you need to have, like, if you're effectively acting as community managers in a way, right? Because you're hearing people's feedback, you're making them feel heard, you're holding the torch, you care deeply about this project as much as I do, probably even more so, right?
Sometimes.
And I think you're like, sometimes, some days. But yeah, like, I think that it's really important, like, genuinely a big part of community management is, I'm not going to talk, it's probably not interesting for a lot of viewers, but I get real excited talking about, like, community management theory in general, like the behind the scenes thought process of, like, behavioral psychology. But like, how do I make it as simple as possible and not bore everybody in this podcast? Okay, so the idea of community management is kind of like a bell curve graph, right? And you've got people that are like aware and they kind of have heard of the project or whatever down here. And then up here, you have advocates. So people that are like yourself, right? You care deeply about the project. Your identity is almost aligned with it in a lot of ways. You know, you create content. You're really excited to grow it. You're part of something like bigger than yourself. It's rewarding in and of itself for you, right? The problem is with a lot of games and Web3 as well is there's lots of points at which when you're going up this curve, there's lots of points where you can fall through and drop off. And what happens when you're down here is not much, right? Like you drop off, you just go away, you don't care, you play another game, whatever. It's obviously not a good thing, but it's not a deal breaker in the end of the world for some people. But when you're up here and you drop off, you don't just like stop playing the game because you're so engaged, you care so deeply, your identity is aligned to this thing, right? You become a detractor. You become the person that's like, man, this team sucks. I can't believe X. I can't believe Y. They've done this. It's a terrible decision. And that becomes a really hard cycle because what's happening is like very valid feedback is coming through of like these things aren't happening and I've been let down and I've been disappointed and I don't feel heard. And then that goes into like a bunch of people who, you know, a team of 30 building the plane as they're flying it on technology that previously didn't exist, figuring it out, like all the things that you said where it's like, these things aren't done overnight, and they're working their butts off, trying so hard. And at the time, very small team, right? Looking out, seeing people being like, ugh, this game sucks. I hate it. And they're like, which is why a community manager is important, right? Because that is not a unique phenomenon. It's like not just a GU thing. If you look at any game, you have detractors. Look at literally anything in life, you have detractors. And so a community manager's job is to do two things. Pull people up the funnel so they become advocates and stop people from falling down and becoming detractors. And there's so many things you can do to like make that happen. Literally depending on the day, on the people, on the product, you're going to have different things available to you. My choice that I made when I first came in was like, okay, step number 1, plug as many holes as possible. Like try and get it to the point where people are feeling heard first and foremost, like we're talking to them more. There's actually more resource. It's not just Eclipse on her own, like, hello, it's fine. It's me there as well. But also those advocates, it's one of the most important things is for me to make sure that you're continuing to be heard and you're continuing to feel supported. So I'm not going to be perfect at it, but it's definitely something I definitely want to try. I hope people can feel that I've been trying. But it's only been 3 months, so check back at the end of my probation. Because I feel like probation's not just for a business, it's also for y'all. Like, if it's been 6 months and I've been in the job for 6 months and you're like, what does she even do? You should make it heard. I would be like fair cop. If you feel like it's been 6 months and you haven't seen any movement, then yeah, you should definitely say something. I hope I'm not setting myself up to fail here. Like, oh my god.
No. I hear you. Like, it's not first of all, it's not a one person job. None of this is. Like, I don't know anyone in any community that, I mean, they may feel they can fix it, but you have so many unidentifiables that you just won't be ready for. And then you have people like this, you know, our amazing guest that's working super hard at it. And I remember the first time I chatted to Kindofsquishy was actually on a Mortal Judgment opening video that I was doing. And I was opening a bunch of packs and a couple of them didn't show up due to just a huge boom in the marketplace.
Oh, that day.
So
that was a fun day for me.
And I made the mistake of just jumping into random Discords on my stream. You guys can check it in my VODs. I just jumped into my stream. I was just like, fucking, someone help me. Obviously, when I'm going to type that into a void of general chat, I'm going to get scammers, which I had. And then Kindofsquishy kind of helped me, not get scammed. So, she's does things. She puts out fires left, right, and center, and it's like we have these massive goals and massive things, but fires continually get lit. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not like I just almost got scammed that day. I'm sure hundreds of people did, and she took the time to message me and say, "Yo, James, chill out. Fucking don't message that person. Come to me.
Bro,
do this."
what are you doing?
Yeah, no, literally, and it was embarrassing because people on my chat were just like, "Dude, you're a fucking idiot," and I was like, "Dude, like I'm just way too chill." But that's how people get ripped off. So people need to be a bit more conservative in their complaints, and also just a bit more patient, I guess. I mean, unless they want the
Here's my take on it. I would like to create an atmosphere where complaints, it's more of constructive feedback, right? I think right now people feel like they've been shouting into the void for a while, and that's literally nobody's fault, for the record. Like the team have not been like set up for success. There's not been enough people there. My whole job is to listen to people, right? And I'm still like, oh, this is a big job. So like, I think that like getting to the point where we're like, I can hear like screaming in the background.
Yeah, there's literally. So I'm sitting in my like my chill room, and there's a fence there, and then there's kids next door. I'm gonna shut the door.
I was like talking about. Oh my god! I was like, is somebody dying in the background? I wonder whether it could be picked up in the vlog, because I was like hearing this like repeated screaming, being like, am I just talking over someone being murdered right now? Like, is this going to be
it's just kids next door playing on the trampoline, champs. It's nothing to worry about. It's just those kids next door are hectic, and I'll tell you any day of the week that they're hectic. Okay.
Oh my god, amazing. Anyways, like, now that we know a murder wasn't happening, I guess the main thing for me is like, I still want people to feel like I don't like the narrative of like, don't complain. And not that I don't like it, it's more I want people to feel like there's trust there, that if something gets brought up, it's going to be looked at, and I feel like that trust hasn't had the chance to develop yet. So I want people to be like, instead of being like, oh, this sucks, I hate it, I hate you, everything you stand for, it's more like, hey, this thing's happening and I feel this way, and I can be like, on it, got it. And that's on us, right? Like, that's on us to create that atmosphere. And I think where content creators can help, and where like people that feel like they're, you know, part of the community and they're like advocates within the community can help, is by helping to create that atmosphere as well. But it's a two-way street, right? Like, I have to create the dynamic and the environment whereby people feel like they're going to be listened to if they don't shout. Like, people feel like they don't have to shout to be heard, right? And that's my main thing, is like, I have to like balance out people's right to be heard with the fact that like, if people provide it in a constructive way, it's way easier for me to do something with the feedback as well. Because like, when you're angry, you're just like, you know, I don't know, I'm assuming we're allowed to swear. We're allowed to swear, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
You're like, whatever.
Absolutely.
Like, okay, cool, great. I was just like, I'm not sure anymore. I came from a very conservative multinational company where it was like, you swear, it's bad. And now I'm like, all right, I guess I'm allowed to swear.
I've said fuck like 4 times in this stream already. Like,
right.
This thing already, yeah.
Perfect. Well, I'm very excited to be able to work for a company that allows me to say fuck on podcasts. But like, I want to get to a point where people aren't just like, fuck you, fuck this sucks. Because that's hard for me to actually do anything with. All that is like a bad vibe, which is not to say that it's not justified. It's just, it's hard for me to work with. When it's like, hey, X is happening when Y is here and it equals Z, and why don't we do ? That gives me something to work with. And yeah, it's like such a hard one to unpick, because you don't want to be like, your feelings aren't valid. Like, don't yell at us. But you also want to be like, okay, well, what's the most constructive way to go about doing this? I feel a lot safer now that there's not screaming in the background, just by the way. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's way better. We shouldn't have ever have screaming in the background. Yeah, no. Well, no,
it's just like a true crime podcast.
Well, I think what would have been weirder is if, because I was sitting there listening and going, yeah, this kid's next door. I hope they shut up. But you said something. I was like, yeah, I can shut the window. I should have just shut the window. I mean, I was just hoping they'd shut up.
I was hoping and I was assuming that it was coming from your end. Because if it was coming from my end, that's the immutable office. And I would have a lot of concerns as to why that level of screaming was happening in the building. So I'm just glad that it was you, not me.
Coming from the mutable end, that would have been some serious Series 1 Stranger Things shit going down. Just 11 Papa! Just... Okay, so what you were saying, I think, no, you're right. People need to stop writing with their emotions because people just can't lose a game and go, fucking, and they're just like, fucking nature. This is unfair. They're able to do this, and yet they bring nerfs in, but it's super crazy that people bring their emotions in when this game. This isn't like Emotions Unchained. This is Gods Unchained. You know what I mean? Like, we don't want to hear what you... Yeah, it doesn't matter how you feel. Like, how you feel doesn't matter. You know what I mean? And I've been through this recently. I went from Mythic to Midnight Shadow 3 days ago on stream. I've got back up to Diamond, and I'll be getting back to Mythic tonight. But, I mean, people don't want to hear you go, fucking stupid game, fucking this and that. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, you're just having a bad time. And I feel like you need to get your counselling outside of Immutable X. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like there's a bunch of places you can go to get that anywhere, like Call Mission Australia. You know what I mean? Like, have a chat.
I mean, I am doing, because I'm literally insane, I am doing university on the side. I'm doing a social science degree. So, at one point I will be qualified to talk to you about your emotional needs, but not right now. I think I hear what you're saying, but I would gently challenge it because I think it's less like your emotions aren't important. Like, I feel like emotions are the reason why people care, right? People caring deeply about the game is why they're advocates in the first place. I think that it just needs to be... We need to provide opportunity for those emotions to come out in a way that's more constructive and better. And in absence of that opportunity, people are just going to be like, brr, about stuff. So yeah, I don't know. It's a really interesting problem, like to zoom out and not take it personally and think of it as a purely theoretical problem to solve. It's bloody interesting. Like it's why I got into community management in the first place, is because like understanding human behavior is really interesting. Like when you think about like why people feel the way they do about things and like why they say things, why, like social theory, why we talk about things, why we gather around certain topics, communities in general, that like micro communities and like just the concept of a meme, like this shit is really fascinating and it's really cool. So yeah, that's kind of why I got into it in the first place. So I don't know, I think I'm rambling now, but it's definitely the kind of thing. The topic where it's like, what topic could you just like talk about for half an hour unprompted? Mine is just like the theory of communities and like human behavior around communities and sex subcultures and things like that. So yeah, I'm going to stop. But anytime you want me to talk about that stuff for half an hour, I totally can.
No, I love that. I love that. And I think it's probably a massive part of why you got your job, because people look into the future and they think to themselves, okay, what's going to change technology? What's not going to change people? What do we need? People that manage people that understand people. And that makes a huge amount of sense. That makes a massive amount of sense. Like the deeper that you can get into that, then the more valuable you are, and I totally appreciate that. But I think, I mean, shit. I really understand what you're saying, but in saying that, I started as very empathetic. I did. When I first started, I was extremely empathetic. Anyone that... Yeah, no, exactly. Someone comes into your stream and they say, hey, this is happening, and you're like, oh man, that's gnarly, bro. Like, let's work on that. But then if you're into growth, you realize it's impossible to maintain that. And one thing that I want to see is Gods Unchained grow. That's one thing I really want to see. It's super important to me personally, and I don't want people to have a dig at me if you want, but like you guys will see, I open Pokemon, I open fucking Magic on stream, I open Dragon Ball on stream. Like TCGs has always been a part of what I do, but only TCGs that I can sell again. So if that makes sense.
No,
so,
absolutely.
So I like to create value in that and create some excitement around that. And that's why I love Gods Unchained. I find it extremely exciting, and I am so happy to be a part of it in any way. Like, and that's why I started doing this podcast, because I want to start reaching out to people like yourself. So it's like, okay, these other people that, and you have to cater to every type of person to create a community and to get the maximum influx of people trying a game. You need to cater to every community. So how do you try to cater to every type of community? Because this is insane. This is insanely hard. We've got personality types going through the roof. I used to think it was disc profiles, like, dominant, influential, steady, compliant. But then I got taught that there's 4 sub, things of each of those, and then it could go even further. So I was like, how do you, not just create, but also try to manage people with all those personality types? It's crazy. It's insane.
It's so interesting. It's such a fun and complex problem to solve. I'm such a weirdo for feeling that way, I know, but like, it's why I do what I do, right? Like, it's like you said, it's the thing that I'm interested in. I think also the extra juicy thing for me, and why I find Web3, I want to do a tweet thread about this actually when I have time, and I never have time lately, but I find Web3 communities so interesting compared to Web2, and it's for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is the purpose for play, like the purpose for being involved in the community. Because let's say you really like Hearthstone, or you really like Elder Scrolls Online. The reason for play, normally when you kind of like boil it down from like a marketing level, you've got mastery, like you want to be the best. You've got social, so you want to play with your friends. Collectibles, so you want to be the kind of person that like 100%s everything and collects all the things. And then there was one other one that I can't think of, but they're all very like play oriented, right? Like you don't really think outside of that world. But when you go into the world of Web3, I have to be careful, like legally there's words I can and can't use and all that sort of stuff. But like when you go into the world of Web3, it goes beyond just play. There's an entire ecosystem of ability to engage that unlocks that didn't previously exist in Elder Scrolls Online. And the closest thing is like, when I talk to people, because I come from a world where like people are very anti NFT games in general, and they ask me to explain it to them all the time, and they're like, oh, but like, why would you bother doing this thing? And a lot of the time I tell them like the concept has existed for a while. Like think about like WoW farming and Diablo auction house, right? Where people were generating real world value from their in-game experiences. And that was like a gray zone jerry-rigged solution, but it was naturally happening. And so a game like Gods Unchained is a really interesting extension of that, where people are no longer just playing because like they want to be really good at the game. They're playing because they, like you, want to pull something really rare and like want to have something really valuable, or they want to collect all the cards and have everything, or they want to be the kind of person that is making earnings, like because they see the time is the investment, but it's also something that they're getting back for the ways that they're playing. And so for me, the problem's even broader than just like personality types. It's also fundamentally the reason why people are in the game in the first place. And I think that's almost harder, because you can deal with different personality types by unifying everyone behind a single message, or like a single, we're all going on a journey together and this is our destination. And you might have a different role within that. Maybe you're really like outgoing personality. Maybe you're like cynical and you have a lot of opinions, but like if we're pointed in the same direction, it's relatively okay. But if you're coming from like a completely different place to someone who, you know, they want the game balanced a certain way because they care very deeply about playing at a certain level, and then someone else wants the game balanced completely differently because they want the value of their cards to be different, like, that's hard. That's how do you account for that? And I honestly believe that I'm very lucky to be one of the community managers at the forefront of this thing. Like, we are in uncharted territory. We're treading new ground. Nobody has the solutions figured out. Whereas in Web 2, it's like, yeah, you got the archetypes, you got to do this and you do that, and this is the strategy and these are the tactics. And you can like community managers, we all do it. And I'm going to let on a little industry secret. Social media managers, community managers, marketers in general, people that work at agencies, we have a PowerPoint presentation. And that PowerPoint presentation goes with us from company to company. And we kind of reconfigure a few of the things, change a few of the words, but like more or less the same. When I joined Gods Unchained, I had to start everything from scratch. It was so completely different to every other game I've worked on that like I couldn't just be like, all right, I'll do this. Yep, copy, paste. All right, cool. Because it's just so fundamentally different. So yeah, like the answer is I don't know because no one's gotten there yet. It's really, again, I'm a big dork about this stuff, but like it's really interesting to me.
No, it's exciting. It's really fucking exciting, and I really, really, really love it. Like. And one thing I'm kind of starting to get out of, actually, one thing that I'd love to ask you about is, have you got anything to say about, or how do you feel about Guild of Guardians? And do you think that the Gods Unchained guys will be interested in that? Have we got some similar ground to get into that? Because I'm from Final Fantasy backgrounds. I love Final Fantasy. The games I love is Final Fantasy. I'm strict on Pokemon Go. Like I love collecting. That's what I love to do. What's Guild of Guardians like? And has that got anything to do with Gods Unchained, or is this a new thing? And the last thing is, which I think is really important, that I think people are really, stressed about, is if you start putting your attention into Guild of Guardians, is that going to take from Gods Unchained?
I have a great answer to the first question by answering the second one first. I think my interaction with the Guild of Guardians team is as much as like when for example, we did a bunch of those surveys, right? We were starting to see results coming through and we shared those results with Guild of Guardians to be like, yo guys, like we're all on the same team. Let's make sure we're thinking. Every now and then I'll be in like an all hands meeting with like everybody from all of the studios, and I'll see faces. I know a couple of them personally outside, just from like the games industry in Australia is very tiny, so like everyone knows everyone, and so I know a couple of them, and I'll say hi to them. But day to day, in terms of like breaking down my meetings and the time I think about Guild of Guardians, it is 0%. Does that mean that I think that people will be interested in Guild of Guardians? Yeah, I think that game rules. Like, I got to get my hands on it very, very briefly because they did like internal testing, and I was like, oh yeah, this is awesome. This is like it's not the same at all. It's completely different. It's obviously mobile first in a lot of ways, but it depends on how you play games in general, right? It depends on what kind of gamer you are. There's going to be people that are going to absolutely adore both games for different reasons. They're going to play them both. It's going to be awesome. And obviously that's something that we want to see happen in the longer term, but it's stuff that I can't really speak to because I'm like, Gods Unchained 100% of my day. But yeah, like I think some people will be like, Guild of Guardians is not for me, Gods Unchained is my baby, and that will be totally fine. And there'll be people that come into the Guild of Guardians world and they'll experience it, and maybe they'll come into Gods Unchained, or maybe they won't as well. I think that the way that they've set up the studios is very smart. It's very similar to how it was at Bethesda. So like they've got studio teams with people that are like at a studio level, so they're kind of helping to publish the game, so to speak, and they kind of help people like me who are in like an individual team, so Gods Unchained studio, and they kind of help facilitate those things. But there's the amount of people that like their job is to work across both projects, I could count on my hand. I actually don't, I think it's less than that. I think it's like 2 or 3 people. most people are on
Wow.
one project or the other. So like when I say there's like 82 people working on Gods Unchained now, that's Gods Unchained. That's not Immutable. That's not Guild of Guardians. That's not any of the other studios. That's just our team. But I think the benefit that you get is the learnings from the other teams, like being able to kind of leverage each other and work together in collaboratively, and like, you know, from like a marketing and strategy point of view, you've got like a lot of brains where you can like take some of the ideas like I was talking about with like the copy paste PowerPoint presentation thing. We're both working on a similar problem, so we can help each other. But we're not, there's no resources that will ever be taken away from Gods Unchained and put on Guild of Guardians, because we're just so different. I hope that answered your question.
No, that's good to know. So, it's good to know. And I think that'll actually help a lot of people, because people, I'm just going to be straight up, people think to themselves, hey, you know, we're all Gods Unchained, and the same company's bringing out this game, and I don't want them to dilute resources. So that's really, really good to hear.
Totally.
So everyone's staying on the project. No, that's really, really good. So where do you see Gods Unchained being in 1 year from now?
Oh boy. Okay, so we're bringing out the roadmap for the game at the end of this month. I had a meeting about it this morning, actually.
Nice.
At that point, I'll be able to give you like a lot more specific things in terms of like the timeline of stuff. But I don't think that's your question. I think your question is more like, where are we as a broader term? I think that we have, you know, it's been 3 months since I joined. We're still getting to know each other, like everyone in the community. There are some people that I've not spoken to as much as I should have, because like they deserve much more time with me, but I've just been pulled so many different directions. So by a year from now, we'll all be aligned on, we'll know exactly what's going on. We'll know exactly where we're going. A lot of features that people have been really wanting and asking for will have been delivered by that point. We'll have a lot more transparency. I think that more importantly we'll have spent a year delivering on promises, which is something that is really important to me personally, but also more importantly, important to the business, right? I think that the inability to deliver on things that we've promised has been something that a lot of people in the company feel like nobody has made decisions to be like, no, we're not going to do this thing. It's been purely through the amount of projects and the amount of resources devoted to being able to execute those things. Now what we're doing is we took a step back. We went, all right, what have we got to achieve? What's the big picture? Where are we going to go? How are we going to deliver this thing? And what do we need to get there? And we've taken that step internally, and we've had those conversations internally, and everybody in the team is all right now stability, game quality, squashing those bugs, putting it all in. That is our all-in mentality. That is what everybody's focused on, from like my team to the customer service team to the team that flow graphing team. Like everybody is like, we're making sure that the foundations are solid. That's at some point it's going to be like, all right, time to build. Let's go. And at that point, you'll start to see all the things that we've gone, all right, this is coming soon. You'll start to see those things happening. But the foundations that it has been built on are going to be real solid. So a year from now, what I hope is we're all at the point where everybody that is here right now, feeling the pain, feeling like they're like devoted to the GU community, that they've been putting in all this time and they're not feeling the love for it. For a year from now, my hope and like my singular job really is to make you guys be like, sure, I'm glad I stuck around. Hey, like, I'm really, really look at me now. I really want us to be able to go a year from now. Look at us now. Like, I think that would rule. It personally, as like a personal narrative, like it would have meant that there's been a lot of really interesting problems that I've solved for, from a community perspective. But broadly as a team, everybody is very like, since we've gotten the resources on board, since we've gotten, a lot of big hires of like executive level strategic thinking people have come on board and have enabled a lot of people like Clay, for example, like game director, to be able to focus on the game right? Rather than all the other stuff. And we can feel it internally. So we're at the point now where we're like, okay, we're all rowing, and instead of everyone like individually with a paddle just being like, we're all rowing together, and we're like, oh, okay, we're feeling it. But obviously that's going to take a little time to be felt externally, right? So yeah, my job is to be like at the back calling the shots, being like, hello, row, everybody, look, we're rowing. Weird analogy.
No, I love that. That's huge. So, is there, and this may be a super stupid question, but I really have never thought about this until just then. Is there any relationship between you guys and Token Trove? Is that a thing, or is that not a thing?
That's a really good question that I actually don't know the answer for. I tend to stay out of those types of partnerships, mostly because for my own sanity more than anything else. Like the amount of meetings that I'm in whilst also needing to talk to everyone in the community is like, if I showed you my calendar, you would be like, what is going on? How does she live? So I try and stay out of things that aren't like immediately related to community. But with that being said, I wouldn't be surprised. Like obviously the Immutable team have a lot of like partners with a lot of like all sorts of partners that they have. So I would not be surprised, and I certainly wish that I could answer that question a lot better than I guess.
That's so good.
It's kind of like my EBGames answer where I'm like, I don't know, possibly.
No, that's totally sweet. That's totally sweet. Okay, sweet. So have you got any advice? So just to wrap it up, have you got any advice for new Gods Unchained players at all, really?
I think welcome, first of all. If you're a new Gods Unchained player, welcome. I think that the main thing I would give as advice is you're in a very powerful position in that you have a lot of ears listening to what you have to say right now. Even if it may not necessarily feel like you're being heard, every single message that gets typed, into the Discord or onto Reddit, like someone's seeing it, depending on the time zone and depending on like, who. Even like I'll get messages from devs being like, "Did you see this?" And I'm like, "Yes, I was gonna send it to you." Like, come on, dude, it's fine. So if you have a question, if you have a problem, if you have just thoughts in general, definitely make your voice heard for sure. And I truly believe in the power of this community, like the passion that everybody has in it. I see it, like, even when everyone's at, like, their ragiest and their rantiest and they're, like, most unhappy, when a new person joins or when someone new is streaming, everybody rallies around and goes, yep, this is how you play it, this is how you get on board, this is the go, and that is amazing. We love to see it. Big fan, personally, but also, like, I think that is the power of Web3 communities, to be honest. So, yeah, get involved. The more you get involved, the more you put in, the more you get out, I think, with these types of things in so many ways.
Huge.
So, yeah, that's probably
huge.
My advice.
And my very last question for the day is, have you got a message for... So what about, like... what about Gods Unchained content creators that don't feel heard or that haven't communicated with you? Have you got anything to say to them? People that have been putting in a lot of time, like I feel very heard myself, but I do know a lot of people that don't. Just saying. So is there anything that you have to say to them at all?
First of all, thank you. The fact that you're here is awesome, and it's not, you may not feel heard, but you are, and you're seen. I think that practical advice in terms of people that, are looking for me to say, like, how can I be more heard? How can I be seen more? I think chatting with me in the Discord, just tagging me in things. My DMs are a nightmare. So, like, if you try and DM me, it's always very hard. I try and get through them, but it's normally, like, a significant delay before I get back. So, like, tagging me in the Discord, reaching out to me. I am one person, so ultimately, sometimes I gotta sleep, sometimes I gotta do life stuff. I've got like an average of 9 hours I spend in meetings a day somehow. I don't understand that, but yep, that's my average apparently. But it's my main priority is to make people feel heard. So if you're not feeling heard and if you don't feel heard, I want to fix that and I want to make that better. I can't have a personal dialogue with every single person. I'm damn well going to try though. Like, I'm going to do my best. And yeah, if you have like specific thoughts on things that we could be doing better in the community specifically, because obviously I talk to the devs all the time, and like all the feedback that people have about like this card or this mechanic or things like that, I pass on. But I personally don't have ultimate control over that. What I do have ultimate control over is anything that's community oriented. So it's like the content creator program. You should do it like X or Y or this other people. They do it this way and it's really good. You should do it that way. I'd love to hear that stuff. Sometimes I'll just emoji react and that's it. But like, yeah, for sure. Make yourself heard and let me know if you're not feeling it, because I want to hear that stuff.
I love it. Well, that's huge. Well, that's pretty much it. Have you got anything else that you want to say to kind of wrap it up?
Sydney sucks. No, just kidding. I don't know. I don't really have anything else to say. Other than like, it's been a blast. It's been great. I want to try and do more of this stuff in the future. So if there are other content creators watching this being like, why did she go on his and not mine? Like, ask me. Like, straight up ask me. I'm going to try and make the time for as many of you as possible. So, yeah, let me know. Very excited to, see what the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months bring. I have a lot of hopium. I feel enthusiastic. I hope that doesn't die. I don't think it will. Like, I see the roadmap. I see the way we're aligned internally. And I feel good about it. So I hope that I can bring that to everybody else as well. Love that. Well, yeah, guys, by all means. The only reason I got this interview was just literally by messaging Kindofsquishy. So make sure you can't just assume it's going to happen. She didn't approach me. I approached her. So obviously, put some fucking work in, Like, I'm not going to say that. Oh God. Right, well, it's been really nice to chat to you. Thank you so much. It's been enlightening, and I hope I can chat to you like soon again. Yeah, for sure. Anytime. It's been a blast. Awesome. Well, I hope you have an amazing day, and we'll catch up soon. Thank you so much. Thanks. Bye.